Imagine this. A British guy walks into a New York diner and says, "I'm absolutely knackered, mate. Fancy a cuppa?" The American waiter just stares back, blinking, thinking he's either speaking in riddles or casting a spell from Harry Potter. And on the flip side, an American tourist in London blurts out, "Dude, that burger was awesome." And the Brit at the next table mutters, "Awesome? What is it, fireworks?" That's the magic of slang. It's not just words, it's culture in a nutshell. It's the little inside jokes a country tells itself that outsiders don't always get. And when you compare British slang to American slang, you don't just notice differences. You notice an entire Atlantic Ocean of confusion. Now, here's the thing. Both Brits and Americans technically speak English, but the truth? Half the time it feels like we're speaking two completely different languages. Americans pump gas, Brits fill up with petrol. Americans wear pants, Brits wear trousers. Because in Britain, pants just means underwear, which means when an American proudly says, "I love your pants," in London, they might accidentally be flirting. And slang takes this confusion to the next level. Because slang isn't in textbooks, it's not in school. It's made up, passed around, and it changes every decade. Slang is living, breathing language. And when you put British slang and American slang side by side, you end up with moments that are absolutely hilarious and sometimes completely awkward. Like, let's be honest, Brits throw around the word bloody like it's punctuation. It's bloody hot today. That's bloody brilliant. Meanwhile, in America, bloody sounds like a scene from a crime drama. And don't even get me started on fanny pack. In the US, it's a useful little bag you strap around your waist. In the UK, the word fanny means something very different. Let's just say if you ever walk into a London pub and announce you've got a fanny pack, expect some raised eyebrows. But here's the best part. Slang tells us how people really live, what they care about, how they joke, how they complain. Every slang word is like a snapshot of culture. Americans will hang out with friends. Brits will chill with mates. Americans might say something is sick if it's cool. Brits might call it wicked. Both sound dramatic, but hey, they mean the same thing. So in this video, we're diving deep, but in a fun way. We're breaking down 10 categories of slang where the US and the UK completely clash or sometimes surprisingly agree. We'll talk about greetings, insults, food, money, even, let's just say, some naughty words that mean totally different things on each side of the pond. And trust me, some of these are going to shock you. Some are going to make you laugh out loud. And some might even make you question if Americans and Brits should carry around a slang to English dictionary just to talk to each other. So grab your cup or your coffee, because this is British slang versus American slang. And spoiler alert, one side thinks the other sounds ridiculous, but which side is right? Well, let's find out. 1. Greetings and everyday phrases. Here's the thing about greetings. They sound simple, right? A hello here, a hi there. But once you step into the world of slang, greetings in the US and the UK become a whole comedy show on their own. Take America first. If you walk into a room, someone might casually toss out a "what's up?" or just shorten it even further to "sup." Now, if you're British, this can be confusing because the natural reaction is to look up, like, "What's up? The ceiling?" But in the US, "What's up?" doesn't actually mean you want an answer. It's just code for, "I acknowledge your existence." Now flip it around. In the UK, if you bump into someone, they might greet you with, "All right?" Simple, short, to the point. But here's the twist. They don't mean, "Are you all right?" They're not worried about your health, your bank account, or your love life. It's just hello. But if you're American and someone says, "All right?" your instinct is to spill your guts. "Yeah, I'm good, thanks. A little tired. Dog kept me up last night. Rent's due, but we're surviving." Meanwhile, the Brit is already 10 steps down the street thinking, "Mate, I didn't ask for your life story." And then we've got the casual add-ons. Americans are big on, "Hey man, yo dude." Or if you're in the South, the legendary howdy. It's warm, it's informal, it's got cowboy energy. Meanwhile, in Britain, you're more likely to hear oi, elomate, or hiya. Imagine an American tourist hearing a loud "oi" across the street. They think they are in trouble when in reality it's just someone saying hello. Let's not forget the difference in tone. Americans tend to smile more when they greet. "Hey, how are you?" Big energy, big smiles. Brits, a lot more understated. "You all right?" with a nod. It's like a competition of who can say the least while still technically greeting you. And if you really want to get lost in translation, listen to how they say goodbye. Americans are all about "see ya," "catch you later," "talk soon," or the good old "peace out." Brits, oh, they have levels. "Cheers" works as goodbye. Ta-ta if you're feeling old-fashioned. And if you're in certain parts of the UK, oh, you'll even hear laters. An American hearing laters might think they're stuck in a James Bond film. The funniest part? Both sides think the other is weird. Americans think Brits sound overly polite or like characters from a period drama. Brits think Americans sound like they've had 3 coffees before noon. But greetings are just the start. If you think confusion stops at all right and what's up, wait until we get into the stuff people actually argue about, like food slang. Because when an American says cookie and a Brit says biscuit, they're talking about 2 very different things. 2 food and drink slangs. Food is universal, everybody eats, but when it comes to slang, the US and the UK make even lunch sound like 2 different planets. Take the word chips. In America, chips are those thin, crunchy things you eat out of a bag, Lay's, Doritos, you name it. In Britain, chips are what Americans call French fries, which means if you ask a Brit for fish and chips, you're not getting Doritos with your cod. You're getting what Americans would call fish and fries. Now, here's the kicker. Brits also have something called crisps, which are the American chips. So in short, if you're an American in London asking for chips, brace yourself for hot, greasy potatoes instead of a party snack. And then there's the cookie versus biscuit battle. Americans love cookies. Chocolate chip cookies, Oreos, soft-baked, chewy, all that good stuff. But Brits? They'll offer you a biscuit, which sounds boring, like something your grandma feeds the dog. But in the UK, biscuits can be sweet and delicious, basically cookies. Although to add confusion, Americans also have biscuits, but theirs are buttery, fluffy bread rolls you eat with gravy. So if you tell a Brit you had biscuits and gravy for breakfast, expect them to look horrified, like you've completely lost the plot. Speaking of breakfast, Americans say cereal, Brits say cereal. Sounds safe, right? Wrong. Brits also use brekkie as slang for breakfast. And somehow brekkie makes the whole thing sound cuter. Imagine an American saying, I'm going to grab some brekkie at IHOP. Doesn't work. Let's talk drinks. Americans live on soda. Coca-Cola, Sprite, Mountain Dew, it's soda everywhere. Brits? They call it fizzy drinks, which sounds like something you'd give a toddler at a birthday party, not a grown adult after a long day. And if you really want to stir the pot, travel around the US. In some parts, it's soda. In others, it's pop. And in the South, it's all just called Coke. Yes, even if you're drinking Fanta, you might still hear, want a Coke? It's chaos. Now tea. Oh boy, tea. Brits basically built an empire on tea, so it's no surprise they've got slang for it. Cuppa means a cup of tea, simple, sweet. An American hears cuppa and thinks it's a typo. Meanwhile, Americans don't really have slang for tea because most of them are drinking coffee the size of a swimming pool. And alcohol? Americans might say beer, brew, or cold one. Brits, they're heading to the pub for a pint. They might even call beer lager, bitter, or just a bevy. Americans order shots. Brits? They'll say, let's get some bevies in, which makes it sound like they're stocking up for the apocalypse. Here's where it gets even funnier. Desserts. Americans say candy. Brits say sweets. So Americans say dessert. Brits might say pudding, which doesn't mean actual pudding. It's just the general word for dessert. So when an American asks, what's for pudding in the UK? They're not asking for chocolate mousse. They're just asking if there's cake. And yet both sides swear their food slang makes more sense. Americans laugh at crisps and brekkie. Brits roll their eyes at biscuits and gravy. But if you think food slang is confusing, just wait until we start talking about money slang. Because when a Brit says something costs a quid and an American says it's a buck, they're both right. But neither side knows what the other means. 3 money and shopping slangs. Money. It's the one thing everyone argues about, but somehow we can't even agree on what to call it. Americans pull out their bucks. Brits whip out their quid. And instantly we've entered 2 completely different universes. Let's start simple. In the US, I hear the word buck is everywhere. $5, $10, $100. It's casual, easy, and honestly makes you feel like you're talking about deer instead of money. Meanwhile, Brits use quid. Same idea, casual for pound. That'll be 10 quid, mate. The funny part, quid doesn't have a plural. It's not quids. It's just quid. So while an American might say $5, a Brit says 5 quid. Clean but confusing the first time you hear it. Now here's a fun one. Fiver and tenner. In Britain, if someone says, can you lend me a fiver? They mean a $5 note. A tenner is tenner, sounds simple enough. But imagine an American tourist hearing, that's a fiver. They're thinking, a fiver of what? A fiver of beers? A fiver of fries? In the USD, slang for cash goes in a different direction. Dollars are greenbacks. A $100 bill? That's a Benjamin because of Benjamin Franklin's face. Some people call cash dough or bread. Brits do this too. Bread and dosh are common. But then the Brits go a little wild. Quid? Knicker? Bob. Yes, Bob. Back in the day, a bob meant a shilling. Technically outdated, but people still throw it around. Which means an American might hear, that'll be a couple of bob, and immediately wonder who Bob is and why they owe him money. And don't even get me started on pennies. Americans say cents or pennies. Brits, they shorten pence to just p. So if something costs 50p, you literally say, that's 50p. Imagine being an American in London and hearing, that's 20p. You're thinking bathroom, not currency. Now let's step into shopping slang. Americans love a good mall. In Britain, it's the shopping center, but slang takes it further. Americans hit the mall. Brits pop down the shops. Americans go window shopping. Brits go for a nose around. And when something's cheap in the US, it's a bargain, or maybe even a steal. Brits? They'll call it a proper deal, or if it's suspiciously cheap, dodgy. Discounts and sales? Americans rush to Black Friday. Brits? They've caught on recently, but traditionally they'd talk about January sales. Americans talk about coupons. Brits talk about vouchers. And the best part, Americans will happily say, I saved a ton of money. While Brits brag about saving a few quid. Somehow the British version makes it sound like they're proud of finding loose change under the sofa. Here's a gem. When Americans are broke, they might say, I'm strapped for cash, or I'm flat broke. Brits, they'll say, I'm skint. Which honestly sounds like a medical condition. Sorry, mate, can't come out tonight, I'm skint. Sounds like you should see a doctor. Both sides have creative slang for money, and both think theirs is normal. But this clash sets up one of the funniest cultural battlegrounds, insults and swear slang. Because if you think money slang was confusing, wait until you hear how Brits and Americans creatively trash talk each other. 4 insults and swear slangs. If food slang causes confusion, insult slang causes international incidents. Americans and Brits both love a good jab, but they do it very differently. Let's start in the UK. The Brits are absolute masters of the creative insult. They've got words that sound so ridiculous you almost can't be offended. You plonker. You muppet. You pillock. None of these sound threatening, but in the right tone, they sting. Imagine being called a muppet. It's technically just a puppet from Sesame Street, but in Britain, it means you're an idiot. And honestly, it's hard to be mad when someone calls you a twit. You just laugh. Meanwhile, Americans go bigger and bolder. They lean heavily on 4-letter words. Jerk. Douche. Asshole. Short, sharp, straight to the point. You know exactly what they mean. No translation required. But here's where it gets really tricky. Some words are harmless in one country and nuclear in the other. For example, the classic one, fanny. In the US, fanny is a silly, kid-friendly word for your backside. You sit on your fanny, no problem. In the UK, fanny means something very different, and let's just say it's not PG, which makes fanny pack hilarious to Brits and deeply embarrassing if you say it with a straight face in London. Then there's bloody. In Britain, that's bloody brilliant. Is basically saying really or very. In America, bloody sounds violent, like a crime scene. So an American hearing, it's bloody hot today, thinks someone's bleeding in the street. And don't forget the infamous C word in the US. It's practically the nuclear bomb of insults. You say it, you're canceled. End of story. In the UK? Still offensive, sure, but you'll hear it casually between friends in a pub. You lucky cut. It's almost a weird term of endearment. Americans overhearing that would faint on the spot. Even softer words cause chaos. Americans say idiot or moron. Brits say wanker. Americans don't even use that word, but in the UK, it's everywhere. It's casual, it's funny, it's rude, but not end-of-the-world rude. Same with git or tosser. To an American, these words sound like random noises. And then there's sarcasm. Brits insult you with a smile. Nice haircut. Did you do it yourself? Americans are more direct. Your haircut sucks. Both hurt, but one makes you doubt yourself for hours, while the other just makes you mad. Here's the wild thing. Insults tell you a lot about culture. American insults are aggressive, confident, in your face. British insults? More playful, witty, and backhanded. It's less about shouting and more about making you feel silly. But here's the twist. Sometimes the same word can completely flip. In the US, pissed means angry. In the UK, pissed means drunk. So when an American says, I was pissed last night, Brits think they were furious. When a Brit says, I was pissed last night, Americans think they were angry, when in reality, they were stumbling home from the pub. So yeah, insults are a minefield. But if you think that's awkward, just wait until we get into slang about relationships and dating. Because saying the wrong word there can ruin way more than just your evening. 5 love dating and relationship slangs. If money slang can confuse you and insults can start a fight, relationship slang is where things get downright dangerous. One wrong word, and suddenly you're not. Flirting, you're insulting someone's grandma. Let's start with the basics. In America, you've got your standard flirty terms, babe, honey, sweetheart, cute, simple, very rom-com. In the UK, it's similar. Love is everywhere. You'll hear someone at a corner shop say, all right, love, that'll be 2 quid. No romance, just everyday friendliness. Imagine an American tourist hearing that. They're like, whoa, did the cashier just call me love? Are we engaged now? And then there's the word pull. In the UK, if you pull someone, it means you successfully kissed or hooked up with them. So a Brit might say, I pulled last night at the club. Americans, they hear pull and think you injured a muscle at the gym. Big difference. On the flip side, Americans might say hook up. To them, it's vague. It could mean kissing. It could mean more. Brits do use it now thanks to American TV, but originally they'd just say snog. Yes, snog. Somehow, this word manages to sound both adorable and disgusting at the same time. We had a snog. Americans laugh because it sounds like a cartoon character. Brits just shrug. Now, if things are going well in the US, you might be dating. You've gone out a few times. In the UK, people don't really date the same way. They might say they're seeing someone, which to Americans sounds like you just spotted them across the street with binoculars. I'm seeing Sarah. Oh, really? Does she know? And then we get to relationship status. In America, you're together. In Britain, you might be an item. It's old-fashioned, but still around. And if things end badly, Americans say they broke up. Brits say they split up. Both hurt, but split up makes it sound like you divided the rent money evenly. Here's where it gets dangerous. Pet names. In America, calling someone baby or boo is normal. In the UK, couples sometimes use duck, pet, or even treacle. Imagine an American boyfriend calling his girlfriend treacle. She'd think he's having a stroke. But in Britain, it's sweet. Sticky sweet, literally. And let's not forget rejection slang. In America, you might get ghosted. In the UK, you might get pied. Yes, pied. Like someone threw a pie in your face. He pied me off. It means you got ignored or dumped. Somehow Brits managed to make heartbreak sound like slapstick comedy. At the end of the day, American dating slang feels like it came out of a teen drama. British dating slang feels like a sitcom written by Shakespeare. Both sides can be confusing, but both are hilarious once you learn them. But romance isn't the only place slang gets messy. Next up, work and school slang. And trust me, the differences there can make your first day at the office or in class a total disaster. 6 work and school slangs. Imagine it's your first day at a job in London. Your boss tells you to pop it in the post. You nod politely and spend the next hour wondering if you're supposed to write a blog post, a sticky note, or a resignation letter. Welcome to British workplace slang. Let's start at school in the US. You've got freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. 4 levels, clean and easy. In Britain, forget it. They've got year 7, year 8, year 9, and so on. So while an American teen says, I'm a sophomore, a Brit says, I'm in year 10. Which makes it sound like they're living in some futuristic calendar. And slang makes it even better. Americans talk about homework. Brits call it homework too, but they also say revision when studying. So when an American says, I'm studying, Brits say, I'm revising. To Americans, revising means fixing an essay, not cramming for exams. Brit, I'm revising all night. American, wow, how many essays did you mess up? Now let's jump to the workplace. Americans love buzzwords. They touch base, circle back, think outside the box. Brits do it too, but with their own twist. A Brit might tell you to have a chinwag. That means a chat. Or that something's a dawdle. That means it's easy. Imagine being an American intern in London hearing, don't worry, mate, that project's a dawdle. You're panicking, Googling dawdle, while everyone else is already halfway to lunch. Even the word break is different. Americans take a coffee break. Brits, they have a tea break. Same idea, but somehow the tea break sounds calmer. Probably because they don't drink coffee the size of a bucket. And don't even get me started on the slang for teachers and bosses. In the US, you might call your teacher prof. In Britain, kids sometimes call teachers sir or miss. Americans hear that and think they've wandered into a Victorian boarding school. Meanwhile, in the workplace, an American might complain about their boss. Brits might moan about their governor. Old slang, but you'll still hear it. Both mean the same thing, the person who ruins your weekend. Here's another fun one. Grades. Americans say, I got an A. Brits say, I got a first at uni or a 2-1. To Americans, this sounds like a sports score. You got a 2 on 1, did your team win? The funniest part? Both sides swear their version is normal. Americans brag about acing a test. Brits talk about smashing it. Same idea, different flavor. But here's the twist. Once you leave school or the office, slang gets even wilder. Because the way Brits and Americans talk about transportation and travel might be the single biggest source of hilarious mix-ups. 7. Travel and transportation slangs. If you ever want to experience true cultural whiplash, just listen to how Brits and Americans talk about getting from point A to point B. Same journey, completely different vocabulary. Let's start with the obvious one. Cars. Americans drive trucks. Brits drive lorries. Americans put luggage in the trunk. Brits toss it in the boot. And just when you think you're safe, Brits will also casually mention the bonnet, which is the hood of the car. So if a Brit says, pop the bonnet, an American might picture grandma in a sun hat, not an engine. And then there's fuel. Americans fill up with gas. Brits fill up with petrol. The funny part is gas isn't even gas, it's liquid. Petrol at least makes some sense, but Americans aren't backing down. They'll say gas station, a Brits, petrol station. And if you're in Scotland, you might even hear garage pronounced like garage, which to Americans sounds like the place you store your lawnmower. Now, public transport. Americans ride the subway. Brits take the tube or the underground. Same thing, big train under the city. But the slang is miles apart. And let's be honest, tube sounds way more fun. Americans think it's a water slide. Brits know it's just a sweaty train in London. Even the word bus gets slang treatment. In the UK, people casually say, I'll catch the bus. But they also say coach for long-distance ones. In the US, a coach is either a sports trainer or an airline seat that barely reclines. Which brings us neatly to flying. Americans say vacation. Brits say holiday. But in Britain, even a quick weekend trip is a holiday. So when an American says, I'm going on holiday, Brits might think they're gone for a month, when really they're just taking Friday off. And don't get me started on walking. Americans walk on the sidewalk. Brits walk on the pavement. Which is extra confusing because in the US, pavement literally means the road. So if a Brit says, kids shouldn't play on the pavement, Americans think, wait, you let your kids play in traffic? Then there's slang for actually traveling. Americans love phrases like road trip. Brits do road trips too, but you'll hear things like going on a jaunt or off on holiday. And Brits use car park instead of parking lot, which somehow makes it sound fancier, like your Toyota Corolla is going to a theme park. Even small words cause chaos. Americans say line. Brits say queue. And Brits take queuing so seriously, it's basically a national sport. Americans cut in line, Brits would rather die first. Here's a wild one. In the US, House, if you're hitchhiking, you're catching a ride. In Britain, you might thumb a lift. Same concept, different slang. One sounds adventurous, the other sounds like you're fixing an elevator. So yes, transportation slang can cause a lot of laughs, and the occasional missed bus. But here's the real kicker. Once you arrive at your destination, you'll need to figure out how to talk about entertainment and fun. And let me tell you, slang in that department is just as wild. 8 entertainment and fun slangs. So you've arrived at your destination. Now the real question is, how do Americans and Brits talk about having fun? Spoiler alert, it's not the same. First up, parties. Americans say, we're throwing a party. Brits, they might say, we're having a do. Yes, a do. Imagine an American being invited to a do. That'd be like, a do what? A do laundry? A do taxes? Nope, just a party. And if the party's good, Americans will say it was lit, awesome, or even epic. Brits, they might say it was brilliant, ace, or a proper laugh. Same meaning, totally different vibe. Americans make it sound like a Marvel movie. Brits make it sound like a cheerful comedy sketch. Now, drinking. Americans go to bars, Brits go to pubs. Already feels different. Americans order shots or drinks. Brits order pints or bevies. And when they're drunk, Americans might say, I'm wasted. Brits, on the other hand, have about 400 different slang words for drunk. I'm pissed. I'm legless. I'm bladdered. I'm trolleyed. Honestly, Brits have turned getting drunk into an Olympic sport of vocabulary. And music slang in the US. A good song is a banger. Brits say the same, but they also call it a tune or even a tune. With that spelling, yes. If you ever hear this is a proper tune, you're in Britain. Let's talk about movies. Americans go to the movies, Brits go to the cinema. And the slang follows. Americans say a film was a blockbuster. Brits might say it was a cracker, which to Americans sounds like a snack, not a film review. When it comes to casual fun, Americans hang out. Brits chill with mates. Same concept. Sitting around doing nothing, but one sounds like a teen drama and the other sounds like a lazy Sunday in the rain. Now, sports. Americans go big. Let's shoot hoops and let's toss the pigskin. Brits, let's have a kickabout. That's soccer, of course. Sorry, football. But to an American, kickabout sounds like a dance move. Even video game slang shifts. Americans level up. Brits might boss it. Americans say, that game was sick. Brits, that game was wicked. Both sound like you should call a doctor, but both mean the same thing, amazing. And if the fun goes badly, Americans say, that party was lame. Brits might say it was pants. Which again is confusing because Americans think pants are trousers. Brits think pants are underwear. So when a Brit says, that film was pants, Americans are left wondering why there was so much underwear involved. At the end of the day, both sides know how to have fun, but the slang shows the difference in style. Americans make it sound huge. Brits make it sound cheeky. But here's the twist. When the fun ends and you need to talk about your body or health, the slang differences get even more hilarious. And sometimes awkwardly gross. 9. Body and health slangs. If there's one area where slang gets both hilarious and dangerous, it's when people start talking about their bodies and health. Because the same word can mean totally different things depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on. Let's start with the basics. In the US, your backside is your butt. In the UK, it's your bum. Simple enough, right? But then the US also has booty, while the Brits throw in arse. So suddenly you've got 4 words for the same body part. Imagine the chaos when an American says, nice butt, and a Brit fires back, cheers, mate, nice arse. And remember our old friend pants? In the US, pants are trousers. In Britain, pants are underwear. So if an American says, I spilled coffee on my pants, Brits think it's a very different kind of emergency. Now, health slang. Americans will say, I'm sick if they're ill. Brits, they'll often say, I'm poorly, which sounds like you're 5 years old. And if a Brit says, I'm feeling dodgy, that means they're unwell. Americans think dodgy means shady or suspicious. So when a Brit says, that curry made me feel dodgy, Americans picture the curry committing tax fraud. Speaking of food aftermath, in America, people say, I'm stuffed after eating too much. Brits say, I'm full up. But here's the kicker. If a Brit says, I'm stuffed, it can also mean they're completely doomed. In America, if it's hot, people say, it's scorching, or it's a scorcher. In Britain, you'll hear, it's boiling, or it's roasting. Same sun, different oven setting. If my boss finds out I'm late again, I'm stuffed. To Americans, that just sounds like they ate too many tacos. Now let's talk about injuries. Americans say, I got a busted lip. Brits might say, I got a fat lip. Same idea. Americans say, I pulled a muscle. Brits might say, I did my back in. Which to an American sounds like you just folded yourself in half. Here's a funny one. Drunk slang sneaks in here too. Americans will say, I got hammered. Brits, I got plastered. Same body effect, different building material. And then we get to actual medical slang. Americans might say, I gotta see the doc. Brits will say, I'm off to the GP. Which confuses Americans because GP sounds like some kind of military rank. Even bathroom slang is different. Americans say bathroom, restroom, or the John. Brits, the loo, the bog, or even the WC. Now tell an American you're off to the bog, and they'll think you're heading on a swamp adventure. And don't forget the casual expressions. Americans say, that workout kicked my butt. Brits say, that workout knackered me, which to Americans sounds like you broke your kneecaps. So yeah, body and health slang can get messy fast. But if you think that's funny, wait until you hear how Brits and Americans use slang about weather in daily life. Because trust me, if one thing defines both countries, it's complaining about the weather. 10 weather and daily life slangs. If there's one thing Brits and Americans both love to complain about, it's the weather. But of course, they complain in completely different slang. In America, if it's hot, people say it's scorching or it's a scorcher. In Britain, you'll hear it's boiling or it's roasting. Same sun, different oven setting. And here's the kicker. When Brits say it's a bit warm, that could mean they're absolutely melting. Understatement is a national sport. Americans, on the other hand, will yell, it's 100 degrees out here. And everyone knows exactly how miserable they are. Rain slang? Americans might say it's pouring or it's raining cats and dogs. Brits have a million ways to say rain. It's chucking it down. It's tipping it down. It's lashing. Basically, if water falls from the sky, the Brits have at least 5 slang phrases ready, which makes sense given how much practice they get. And snow, Americans get dramatic. Snowpocalypse. Snowmageddon. Brits? They'll just moan, the trains are knackered again. Subtle but accurate. Now let's step into everyday life slang. Americans say, no big deal. Brits say, no worries. Both mean don't stress, but the British version sounds friendlier. Unless they say not fussed, which means they don't care at all. Americans hear not fussed and think you just don't like drama. Nope, it means you couldn't care less. For something good, Americans might say, that's awesome. Brits will say, that's brilliant. Both sound positive, but one feels like fireworks and the other feels like a polite round of applause. Everyday frustrations also get their own slang. Americans say, that sucks. Brits say, that's rubbish. And if something's really bad, Americans might say, that's crap. Brits, that's pants. Which once again makes it sound like underwear is ruining your day. Here's a fun one, tiredness. Americans say, I'm beat. Brits say, I'm knackered. Same exhaustion, but the British version sounds like you've been physically destroyed. And if you're really unlucky, you might be shattered, which in American slang would mean broken glass, not just needing a nap. And then there are the quirky bits. Americans say guy or dude. Brits say bloke or lad. Americans might say buddy or pal. Brits say mate. And here's the twist. Brits use mate in every possible tone. Friendly? All right, mate? Annoyed? Listen here, mate? Or even threatening. Americans use dude the same way. At the end of the day, both countries have built entire slang vocabularies out of ordinary life. And while Americans go big and bold, Brits go subtle and cheeky. But here's the twist. After all these slang battles, food, money, insults, dating, travel, health, and daily life, the question remains, who actually wins? Whose slang is funnier, stranger, or simply better? So, after all that, what have we learned? Besides the fact that if an American and a Brit walk into the same bar, there's at least a 50% chance one of them is going to say something totally normal that sounds completely ridiculous to the other. We saw it with greetings, Americans yelling, "What's up?" while Brits just mutter, "All right," and hope you don't actually answer. We saw it with food, where chips could mean fries or crisps and biscuits and gravy makes Brits think Americans have lost their minds. Money slang? Americans flex their bucks while Brits quietly count their quid. Insults? Americans go for blunt force trauma, while Brits prefer calling you a muppet and letting you figure it out later. Romance. Americans date, Brits see someone. And if you're unlucky, you'll get ghosted in the US, or pied in the UK. Either way, you're going home alone. Travel and transport? Americans drive trucks and park in lots. Brits drive lorries and park in car parks. Same roads, different dictionaries. Entertainment? Americans throw lit parties, Brits have a proper laugh. And both somehow wake up hammered, plastered, or legless. Body and health? Americans have butts, Brits have bums. Americans are sick, Brits are poorly. And don't even mention pants again, because that one will never stop being awkward. Daily life? Americans think everything's awesome. Brits think everything's brilliant. At least both sides agree the weather is terrible. But here's the fun part. These slang differences don't just confuse us, they define us. They show how language evolves to fit culture. Americans go bold, dramatic, sometimes over the top. Brits go witty, understated, sometimes self-deprecating. And both approaches make perfect sense in their own context. So who wins? Whose slang is better? Honestly, neither. Or maybe both. Because the truth is, the slang isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about identity. It's about humor. It's about how two countries separated by the same language somehow built completely different worlds of expression. And the best part? We get to laugh at each other's versions. Picture this. An American walks into a British pub and orders a pint. A Brit walks into an American diner and orders pancakes. The American tries saying cheers as a goodbye. The Brit tries saying awesome about their food. Everyone laughs. Nobody gets it right. And that's exactly what makes it fun. At the end of the day, slang is what makes language alive. It keeps things playful, personal, and endlessly confusing for tourists. And honestly, the world would be a lot more boring if we all spoke exactly the same. So, what do you think? Who's slangier? Are Americans guilty of turning everything into awesome? Or are the Brits just making up random words and pretending they're real? Drop your favorite slang word, whether it's mate, dude, quid, or bucks, in the comments. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with a mate or a buddy. Because whether you're in London or Los Angeles, slang proves one thing. English may be a global language, but no one really speaks it the same way. And thank goodness for that. Otherwise, what would we laugh about? Cheers, or, peace out.